welcome back to Lex Reads. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about my favorite books of, I hate to say all times, but I'm just gonna say my favorite books. Some of my favorite books. I have narrowed them down because it was like so hard to categorize them. And this list probably is always going to be forever growing because clearly you read new books and then some become your favorite, some don't. So yes, okay, that was a long explanation. Let's just get started. First book is Plum Bun by Jessie Redmond Fawcett. You guys know I've said it time and time again about how much I love the Harlem Renaissance, like obsessed with it. And I became obsessed with the Harlem Renaissance last year, where that's like all I read. And I think the reason why I got introduced to the Harlem Renaissance, it was like a era that you always know. It was when people were talking about the movie Passing. It was like in the works, and I said, you know what, I want to read that before I watch the movie, and was just flabbergasted. And then after that I said, well, I want to read more books from that era, but not the books that everyone knows, because when you think about the Harlem Renaissance, of course you think about Langston Hughes and who else, Zora Hurston. But when I tell you there are so many, and Jessie Redmond Fawcett does not get the praise and recognition as she should, because if it wasn't for her, we would not have a lot of the authors from that time. We wouldn't have Langston Hughes, we wouldn't have Wallace Sturman. But the fact that if it wasn't for her, we would not have Langston Hughes, you guys. That is huge, okay? Because when you think about poetry, and specifically Black poetry, his name is going to come up. So we owe a lot of credit to her, okay? But Plum Bun, this is about a woman named Angela. And Angela, well, she passes for white, but there's so many details into it. But just a quick synopsis. You have a woman named Angela that is extremely talented when it comes to art. She's like a painter. But she decides, I'm going to pass for white because she don't look Black, right? Then she has a sister named Virginia, and Virginia can't pass. She's like my color. And you just see the different types of lives that they have. But the main protagonist is obviously Angela. And then she realizes that it's not green on the other side, because it's like, okay, well, I don't have to deal with race. But another hurdle that she has to deal with is gender. And you already know being a woman is clearly not easy, and you can obviously imagine it was even difficult in the 1920s, okay? Please read this. Fantastic. Next is a series. I was a late bloomer when it came to urban fiction, like novels. The first urban fiction novel I read, I was 28 years old, and it was what's the book everybody talk about? The Coldest Winter Ever, which, by the way, I didn't really like that much. Winter just got on my nerves. But this, after I read that, I said, well, you know what? I want to read some more urban fiction novels. And of course, I want to read some urban fiction novels that no one talks about. Y'all notice up my alley, Unsung Blacks, right? And I got into this and was flabbergasted, y'all. So you have, how many of this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got 7 books in this series, and it's all worth it, right? You have these girls, have Roz, Angela, Jazz, and Kyra, and Kyra, there, and they are extremely smart. Okay, this is where it's different from urban fiction, y'all. You have all these girls are, like I said, extremely smart. Angel is an attorney. I think Roz is a physical therapist. Kyra is a scientist. The other one's also in college. But it's hood because it's the girls' circumstances. You know, they're used to, these little hood men that don't be doing nothing, that be talking all slick and in the drug game. They come out the hood, but they still got the hood in them. It's just they're a product of their environment, right? But when I tell you, girl, this is a roller coaster ride. Okay, so you have the drug game or whatever, but it's not overkill. But you do have the drug game. You got a lot of sex. I'm just gonna tell you that you got a lot of sex. It's almost like, girl, every other page is like they just be doing it everywhere. You obviously got some violence, but what I love about this is the dialogue, and then also too, I love the fact that all these girls are so smart and brilliant. and they are well established. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times when you do read urban fictions, like the girls, they be struggling, they get pregnant at 15 or whatever, and oh girl, and they just all about their man, and then they got a man that be cheating on them, and they know the man cheating on them, but they got to stay with them and all that. Girl, this is not like that. This is like I said, it's a different take on urban urban fiction. Then the second urban fiction series that I want to also highlight that is my favorites is the Ethics series. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books in the series. I just have the 4 physical copies because I listened to the first and second one, which I keep on saying I need to get the first and second book because I want it to all match. But with this, you have a young man named Ethics Okafor, and he is, you don't mess with Ethics, okay? You don't mess with his family. This is a man that he was in a drug game, but he ended up making it really legit. He has 2 kids, well 3 kids, and one of his oldest daughter, Morgan, it was his late girlfriend's baby sister, and he basically adopted her, and that's like the only dad she knows. But something happens with Morgan that causes the family to go just havoc, okay? And like I said, you do not mess with Ethics' family, especially his kids. He does not play. And something happens that is horrible. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say because I can't give it away. I would say in this series, I really like Alani, which if you guys read it, you will be introduced to Alani and her story, Lord. Oh, girl. Yeah. Alani's my favorite. And I also like his youngest daughter, Bella. Bella was a teenager. Who I couldn't stand was Morgan. Couldn't stand Morgan at all. And unfortunately, every other page is about Morgan. And then she has a spinoff called the Butterfly series. Now, I have 3 of the books, and I think Ashley Antoinette is on, 5 or 6 or Butterfly. I don't want to read that because my thing is she not no butterfly. She not even a caterpillar. So I don't want to read that. Morgan got on my last nerves. I really wish she would do a series on Bella, okay? Because look, Bella will be in high school and then you can make her grow up. But Morgan, no ma'am. But this series, fantastic. I urge you guys to read this series. Next this is actually a white author, and it is F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. I mean, this is an American classic. I honestly do agree when people say, oh, this is like a great American classic, because it honestly is. This, obviously, we know about Jay Gatsby and Daisy Buchanan and Tom and everything. And my heart always goes out to Jay, because the way that Daisy did him was just ridiculous. No accountability, okay? And then also, too, the fact that when you really dive deep into this book, and actually when you dive deep into the author's life, he died thinking that he never wrote anything that was good. He didn't like anything that he wrote. He just felt like he was a failure. And really, when this book came out, it wasn't popular. It wasn't at all. When he died, then that's when it got like really popular, and has millions of editions, and they've done how many movies? 2 movies, which I personally like the second one. I like the newest one with Leonardo DiCaprio. He embodied Jay Gatsby. He was perfect. I mean, I like Robert Redford. Love Robert Redford. Okay, like, girl, he still look good. He 100, but there's something about that. The new Great Gatsby, they just did it at the park. But yeah, this classic, I mean, come on now, everyone knows Great Gatsby. Next is an autobiography, well, a memoir, and it is Grain of X by Ilyasa Shabazz. Now, I'm not a nonfiction girl at all. Lightweight, can't stand it. But I read this in college, I want to say my junior year, and was just amazed. Because I went through a little small phase of being obsessed with Malcolm X, where I read all his critical analysis, watched so many interviews. I mean, just girl, watched the movie. I mean, everything. But this is great because you see her life, her sister's lives, her mom's life after he was, assassinated, because she was like 3 years old or something when he was assassinated. And Betty, Dr. Shabazz, pregnant at the time when he passed. And oh my goodness, and she already had, because I believe there's 6 girls, um, and I think she was pregnant. She wasn't pregnant with the twins, was she? Oh girl, I know she was pregnant when he had passed, and they firebombed their house like a week prior to him passing. And because he was, obviously Malcolm X, and had a lot of people had, people had a lot of hatred. You had some people that had a lot of hatred for him. They would not touch her family, meaning that they wouldn't help with housing, with finances, or anything. And Ruby Dee and Ozzie Davis like played a huge part financially with helping her and her daughters. Also Muhammad Ali, Harry Belafonte. You had a lot of people that were able to help them, and also too, Betty Shabazz was just a resilient woman. The fact that she raised those girls up and went back to school to get like a master's degree because she was a nurse. And that woman doesn't get a lot of recognition as like a Coretta Scott King. But I mean, when you think about it, Malcolm X doesn't get a lot of obviously praise because they just equate him with like hatred and white people are all devils and stuff like that. No, if you really look into it, especially his Any Means Necessary, he's saying if they have guns, then we have to bring guns. But he's not saying like, oh, just kill every white person. His thing is, like go toe to toe, And then also too, a lot of people forget towards the end of his life, he start talking nonviolence. People forget about that. But this is fantastic, you guys. If you want to know how she grew up and how her sisters grew up, I would highly recommend this. This is fantastic. And also, it did not read like a nonfiction. Next is a YA novel, and it's by Sabina Khan, Meet Me in Bombay. And this came out last year, and when I tell you, I was just outdone. This, sometimes I forgot that it was a YA novel. Sabina Khan has become an automatic buy. She's actually coming out with her 4th book next week, and I will be getting it, okay? And this, I love it because, first of all, Sabina Khan is an Indian Muslim author. And all her books, they have obviously young Indian girls and boys. And it also has themes of homosexuality because her books were inspired by her daughter who came out to her and her husband. So in this particular story, you have a girl named Asha. Asha is 17 going on 18. She lives in America. I believe she lives in Illinois. Her parents want her to go to a university in the United States. Also wanted her to go to a really good high school, and she does all that so smart. But she meets a young man and becomes pregnant. And again, she's Indian, she's Muslim, and she's 17 years old. So she decides to give her baby up for adoption. And yes, and this is not a spoiler, when her birth daughter turns 18, she writes letters and says, if you find it in your heart on your 18th birthday, I want you to meet me in Mumbai, which is a city in India. And you see how it goes. Like I said, this did not read like a YA novel. This is fantastic, you guys. Please read this. If any of her books, I would say this one is really good. And sometimes YA can just be, oh Lord, it can be a touch and go, because I have to keep on reminding myself, these are children and you're a grown adult. So of course you're not gonna make the decisions that they make. And if they say something stupid or do something stupid, they're kids. Y'all, please read this. Please read this. Next is Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, when I got back into reading, only thing I was reading was African literature. And when I got introduced by her, I was just, I love watching interviews of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. At one point, it was like every single day I was watching an interview of hers. She's a fantastic storyteller. Americana is about a girl named Afemelu who is from Nigeria, and she gets to go to the United States for university. And she also grew up with a young man named Obinze, and they grow apart. And you see his life and you see her life and how they both navigated it. This also is a good representation when it comes to the immigrant life and how it is very difficult, okay? Especially when you are trying, especially when you're not a citizen in the United States, and it can be difficult, very, very difficult. She talks about that. She talks about the things that you would talk about in private, but you wouldn't talk about in public. Again, read this. This is, I would say, out of all her books, if you don't know where to start, I honestly would say read Americana. And then next, probably Purple Hibiscus, which is her first book. Half of the Yellow Sun, it's alright, you know, but yeah, it's alright. But I would say, yeah, do this first. If you haven't read any of her books, read Americana first. Next, oh my goodness, y'all, Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. This is a new author that I just discovered last year and was flabbergasted. I have 3 copies of this book. This girl, and it looks like every edition that Yellow Wife comes out, I'm going to get it. That's just point blank period. I love Sadiqa Johnson. I love her writing. Fantastic storyteller. She knows how to do historical fiction, like hands down. She, in my book, she's the best. Okay. This is inspired by Mary Lumpkin, who was a real life woman. She was a slave. She could pass for white. You have the Lumpkins jail, and you have a slave owner who married her, had 5 children from her, but he was extremely, mean is not even the terminology to use. Cruel is not even a terminology to use. He owned a jail where if your slave is, you know, not doing what you want them to do, you send them to that jail and they get you all the way together, okay? But it's contradictory because he married a black woman and had kids, and it looks like he was not cruel to his kids. So yeah, this is a different take on a slave narrative. It honestly is. I'm gonna be honest with you. And also too, some of these passages, it is difficult to read, but I always go back to what Sadiqa Johnson says. She says, I understand that it's difficult to read, but can you imagine living it? And she said, the one thing I can do as a writer is write it, and the one thing you can do as a reader is read it. That's all you can do. Next, of course, I have to mention Praise Song for the Butterflies by Bernice L. McFadden. Bernice L. McFadden is my favorite author of all times. And I would say this is probably my favorite book of all times. There's no one like Gobea Kata. Oh my goodness. Her perseverance, her strength, her courage. You have a young girl that goes to a shrine, which is equivalent to slavery. And I believe in Uganda, they have something called Chikazi. Well, in Africa, they have something called Chikazi system, and Chikazi is it's like same terminology as like being a slave, basically. And these girls, they go to, you know, this shrine, and you basically you live there forever. And it is like slavery. So you have to work night and day. You get physically, mentally, sexually abused. And Obea goes there at the age of 9, and she gets out and she stays there for about 15 years. And she was really, you know, blessed because she was able to get out. But oh my goodness, y'all. And the fact that this is obviously classified as a historical fiction, and to know that that practice still goes on. Yeah, guys, please read this. And also, really urge you guys to listen to it on audio. Robin Miles does the narrating, and it's fantastic. Please read this, you guys. Please, please, please read this book. And then lastly, I always have to mention this, and it's I Know Where the Cage Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This is the first book I read on my own when I was in 8th grade. I was not a reader. I was not a reader at all, okay? And the first time I read a book on my own, I was about 13 years old, okay? So, and I was just fascinated by this because you have Maya, who grew up with her grandmother. I grew up with my grandmother. You have her also growing up with her older brother. I have an older sister, and they are very, very close. I'm close to my sister. And oh my goodness, just she tackles sexuality, she tackles abandonment, she tackles mental, physical, verbal abuse. She tackles the southern, way of life. It's just everything that Maya does. It's just, this book is fantastic. I've read all of her autobiography. I would have to say this and Gathered Together in My Name is probably my favorite too. But I always have to mention this because this introduced me to literature. And I have 2 copies of this book. And also, I love this edition because it has a foreword by Oprah Winfrey. And y'all know Oprah Winfrey loved Maya Angelou. So, yeah. So, yeah, guys, that's all I have when it comes to my favorite books. This is a solid, good list. These are books, like I said, that I have never forgot. I won't forget. I can't forget the characters. I can't forget the storyline. I can't forget any of it. And that's how I classify, my picks. So yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. I'll be back with more Black books. Bye.